Hello and welcome. My name is Brandon Bowers, and I am the producing director of the American Music Theater Project, AMTP, at Northwestern University. And I would love to welcome you all to this wonderful talk forward in regards to Click, a new devised piece co-conceived by the wonderful Professor Roger Ellis here at Northwestern and Margaret Laurena Kemp at UC Davis. We've come together in a partnership to create a new devised work in response to Jacqueline Goldfinger's play Click. And we are wonderfully joined by the likes of Oona Hatton and Jessica Stokes to join us in a conversation about the genesis of Click and a little bit more about the process in creating a new devised work in a virtual environment. So I'll go ahead and hand it off to Oona to introduce yourself and start off the conversation.
Great, thank you, Brandon. So my name's Oona Hatton. I am a professor of communication studies at San Jose State University and also a colleague of Margaret's and an alumni of Northwestern. So lots of connections there. Maybe I'll turn it over to Jessica to introduce themselves, and then we can hop in.
Excellent. I am Jessica Stokes. I'm a PhD student at Michigan State University and the co-founder of Hives research workshop and speaker series on disability and animal studies. And I'm also Margaret's former student and very happy to be here for this conversation.
Thank you both for being here, all of you for being here. I'm Margaret Laurena Kemp, and I am an associate professor at UC Davis and co-troublemaker, co-director, and co-conceiver, along with Roger Ellis, who I'm going to let speak for themselves right now.
Hello, I'm Roger Ellis. I was going to say co-conspirator, co-curator, okay, I could just keep going. Co-director along with Margaret Laurena Kemp on re-click, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Theater at Northwestern University.
So we talked about maybe beginning by having Roger and Margaret share a little bit about how this project came about. We know that there was a scripted play that that this is growing out of. So maybe we could talk about how that was encountered, and then what made the two of you begin to conspire on this specific project.
Well, I always, whenever I'm working with students, it really always starts out with a class project. And we read an early version of this play in my advanced acting class in about two and a half years ago. And the students really had a lot of questions for the play, which made it an interesting play to work with scenes on, because the students were always asking, well, how does this relate to that? So they were interested in the play, and I think one of the things that drew them to it is that one of the characters is trans, but the play isn't specifically about that element of sexuality. Certainly sexuality is a big element, but in a play sort of about sexuality, and there's a trans character, you might think that it's about that, but actually the play is about something else. And the students were also very drawn to the play because there are no adults in this play. They're all college students. They become adults, but they start out as students. So talking with Jacqueline Goldfinger about this play, and then the pandemic hit, and she had adapted the play for exploration on Zoom, or for performance on Zoom. And I actually became more interested in the play after reading the adaptation, because I thought, is this really adapted for Zoom? And how can you adapt for digital performance if you're not engaged in digital performance? And I had started to talk to Roger about it because I was very interested in working with Roger on a deeper level than I did in Antigone Now, where Roger was the choreographer. And Roger suggested that they might make a great co-director. And our conversations became more rich, and I felt like I would like to give that a try. Roger?
Yes. So that was so exciting memory kind of lane journey. I'm getting really just thinking about that whole journey, right? Yeah. So Margaret and I had worked on Antigone Now before. She was kind enough to bring me on as the choreographer, and I was really fascinated by the way that she had said, okay, well, we're in the world of COVID and we're going to keep going in a safe way. And we're going to do something that hasn't been done before in a way that it hasn't been done before, instead of kind of just shutting the process down. And so being involved in a way with those rehearsals, I was really curious that, the research that Margaret was doing around digital performance and this hybrid space, and I knew also that she'd been working in this format since 2015. And so that was also part of the draw to work on this particular project, was just to get the chance to be in that world and to figure out some of the problems that such a process would open up. And yes, our conversations have been really rich on like a weekly basis around this particular play, and it's kind of like a box that you keep opening up. I think that's something that Margaret has said. It's like the more that you dig into it, the more that you find within it. And I'm just coming off of, well, both of us are coming off of an editing process of like sleepless nights of just like, I don't even know what time it is right now. We spent so much time with the material and like listening to over 2,500 individual files of audio and video and piecing that together into films. And not only films, but films that are living on this website that we have developed in partnership with our art director, Jackie Fox. And I'll stop there because I feel that there are other questions.
Yeah, I definitely have a question. So y'all are calling yourselves co-conspirators as one of the many sort of titles you have for each other, and this comes from like breathing together, the sort of etymology of this conspire thing. And so I'm thinking about this question you were asking your students as you approach this piece and as you're transitioning it to the online space. What is my body in the internet? And this like act of breathing together to do this work, even though you're doing it in separate places. So I was hoping you could speak a little bit to the kind of collaboration process and to the notion of embodiment in the play and what role that took on as you transitioned the piece.
Right.
What's funny to me is that so much of this process has been about the body and about embodiment, and it's been very low tech. We've been doing a lot of drawing, journaling, talking to each other. Margaret has led the actors in the company and myself as well in Fitzmaurice voice work and work that's been based around Michael Chekhov. And so that we literally do begin by breathing together, actually, every single rehearsal. And that's been a really key component that we've tried to keep consistent throughout the entire process. And so I was thinking earlier today because Margaret's got me listening to the KCRW radio station that she listens to, and like I'll just put that on. I'm like, oh, who knows? Maybe Margaret's listening to this now. We have rehearsal later, and we don't have time to meet because we are teaching all day. But maybe somehow the frequencies will align and we'll be on the same page at the start of rehearsal. But it's things like that. I think this question, one of the questions I'm really interested in is like, what can ensemble look like in this moment of not being in the same geographic location? And we have an opportunity to expand that.
Right. I mean, and in this, really expanding it in ways, certainly with Antigone Now, a lot of the rehearsal process is very similar, if not the same. And I would say more in depth because Roger's area is the specialization is in moving, so we were able to sort of undergird that in ways that were not possible. And quite honestly, I was the only one in the rehearsal room with Antigone now. So we can sort of be in conversation with one another as we're working through the creative practice. I do some voice work and give it to Roger. Roger does some body work. We give it back to the actors and let them engage in some other exercises. But I was thinking today that another element that we've been able to explore beyond what we did before was this idea of what if the chorus, and Antigone now is set that classical structure, so does this, there's a Greek chorus. What if the chorus isn't in the play, but what if the chorus is actually another group of people, random people from the internet? What happens if we kind of just say, hey, do you want to be in a play? Pick a line and send it to us, right? So that's actually one of the things that we did. So the goal was to get about 100 people. We got about 50, which when I realized there were more things to look at, I was very sad. But it became really an interesting layer of the storytelling, because we do have this community of college students who are impacted by these outside voices. So they literally became voices from the outside who were doing things that weren't even part of our process. So they almost sound like foreigners. They move like people that aren't in our group. So they are really embodying that which is the hashtag, the emoji, all of these ways of communicating that are cut off from how that language is impacting the individual.
That's really lovely and makes me really excited to see that. I'm wondering if you can both talk a little bit more. I mean, you mentioned Roger as having movement as a main entry point, and Margaret, you having voice. Can you both talk a little bit about how that lens has sort of kind of focused your look at this play and how you're engaging with it?
I think that the one thing that I brought into Antigone now that lives in this experience is that I don't feel like traditional scene work is that useful for this kind of storytelling, at least not from my aesthetic, because I do want actors to be present in their entire bodies, 360 degrees, and almost everything that I've engaged with on Zoom, that it's just whatever's going on from here to here. That's the whole story. And I'm very interested to say, oh, where is your body and where is your space? Roger, you had some very juicy explorations of space and how you work with the actors.
Yeah, so Margaret and I are similar in the regard that, this whole full body, 360 degrees of three-dimensional space of physical awareness is really key. And my work is based in embodiment and physical inquiry primarily. And so that's the lens that I encounter everything through. And really, there wasn't really very much, if any, traditional scene work. I agree. I tried it a couple times, but it didn't feel right. um, and so my particular training and background is in lucid body and also in six viewpoints. And so I drew a lot from those particular approaches in addition to things that I had kind of built as well from my travels through performance. And so really getting the actors to encounter their own physical space fully was very important, but then also differentiating their home space from their play space or their laboratory space, because this piece deals with a lot of charged content. And so learning how to ground yourself physically is really important. So much of the work with the voice work is grounding into physical presence in the present moment, learning how to access your imagination. Same thing with the physical work. Understanding like what are the different sensations that your body is experiencing in the present moment and to help bring you back so that you can dive in really deeply into intense material, but then also have many different ways to get yourself back into balance. So that was more than importantly than the physical expression element. It was, I know that this works for helping to ground people. And then beyond that, getting people to inhabit their spaces, but then also to be able to physically listen to each other. And our wonderful intimacy coordinator, Audie Cabral, was really fantastic in helping us explore what it is to experience physical intimacy across distance in a way that within a desexualized work environment that also dealt with boundaries and consent in a way that incorporated like the best practices that we know about from the emerging field of intimacy coordination.
Right.
Yeah.
And thinking through all of those things, and one of the reasons why I feel like Michael Chekhov technique has a lot to offer for this kind of performance, because people are working from their homes, and you don't want an actor to, rehearse this content in their bedroom and then have nightmares. So making sure that the actors are, you can't train somebody in an entire practice in, 6 weeks, but you can offer what is useful for the work. And one of the things we're constantly offering to the actors is not to enter their personal history for this play, to only exist in the moment that you are in now, and use the technique and trust the techniques that we're offering to be able to help the audience tell the story for you. So the idea is that we only go halfway and the audience picks it up and takes it the rest of the way. And then that's when it becomes a personal thing. That's their job. Our job is to open the narrative so that the audience can step into it and take what they take on that day. And I think that also folds over to the idea that you can watch this performance in so many different ways through this website.
Great. Yeah, that also, the conversation that you're having about the many ways to interact with the piece, the opening, makes me think of Roger's questions that they set out to ask in their directing. So what's happening when we decenter the singular perspective, challenge the false notion of universality, and create space for a wider array of voices? And so I was hoping you could speak a little bit more to the role of this multiplicity of voices, and also to the sonic experience of the play, how folks can hear and interact with it. And I know as well, there are music elements that come in for characters that become sort of hooks between characters, ways that they converse or talk with one another. So this kind of intertextuality also allows more voices to come in. So I was hoping you could just speak a little bit to the sonic experience of the play.
Before we talk about the sonic experience, can I just go back a little bit to one of the impulses to work with this? I brought this play into my class because in that particular class, we had more than a few students who were trans or non-binary, and within the pedagogy, the way I feel one must offer it to students is to give them a chance to explore their story, and not have to say, well, you're not really from Russia, but just do that today, right? So how can we make an offering? So that was just in terms of voice and who you are as an individual. That was one of the impulses to bring the work to the stage. And then I'll let Roger continue.
I have so much to say about this universality topic. One of the first things I often say is Aristotle is dead, Shakespeare is dead. And sometimes we act as if they are still living artists, and the collective we in terms of traditional theatrical training, and it's deeply problematic and it's violent because you are saying that if you understand this one point of view, this one experience, you can understand all experiences. I heard Dominique Morceau on a KCRW podcast today make the comparison that, you know, you could, if you just read the New York Times and Washington Post, you understand everything there is to know about the political discourse in the world, and you'll be well informed. It is such a lie. I've been gaslit my entire theatrical training with that. And it's wonderful to be able to step into a process that actually allows the individual artist to work from their own experience and their own cultural objects that they find meaningful, and to not feel like, oh, well, what you do is kind of a side, kind of like sneak in here, like a little bit, but really this is what's important, what matters. So that's behind the editing process of multiple different voices laying over and weaving together in conversation with each other. Um, I was really interested in this notion of ensemble and how you can see one actor's image, but hear another person's voice supporting them in that image, especially in the more charged moments of the piece where it's a lot for one young actor to carry this story. And that was also part of the reason why Margaret decided early on in the process that everyone plays fresh, because everyone is fresh. Everyone has a relationship to the storytelling. And just look at usafacts.org, and if you don't believe me, just look. I mean, this is a really serious problem, and we need to address it, and a series of problems. And so the more voices we have talking about their experience, the more likely we are to be able to solve these problems together. And I think the last thing I'll say is this notion of universality. Often people just repeat that the more specific, the more universal, right? But often who gets to have a specific experience is very narrow. And I like to think of this saying that we are not one, but we're also not two, that we all are human. We share many commonalities, but that make us all the same, but we're also different because the bodies we live in the world in affect how people see us, how we see ourselves, and then like the collision of those two different perspectives.
Thank you so much for speaking to that. I mean, it means a lot to me as somebody who was also in a poetry MFA program where I was constantly told my poetry wasn't universal enough because it was speaking to my experience as a disabled person. And I'm thinking about it in this present moment as I sit here in a yellow chair talking to you, when normally if you were interacting with me in person, you'd see me in a purple wheelchair holding a green cane, and the sort of strangeness of what our bodies are in these online spaces and how y'all dealt with that. I just wanted to say that I very much appreciate your interactions with this notion of undoing this universalizing in the play. And I think that it's a lovely thing to have for college students. So thanks for speaking to that, Roger.
I think it's not just, I mean, it is a lovely thing to have for college students, but I think it's a vital thing for people to witness in performance, because our culture, everything is racialized, it's sexualized, it's demonized. And when you make these shifts, you are interrupting a set pattern of thought, a set pattern of how we perceive. And you are making an opportunity for someone to think for the first time, rather than continuing to live in some kind of patterned thought around how it's supposed to go and how it's supposed to look.
I'm wondering if I can go back a little bit to a pedagogy question. You've already both been speaking, you've given several examples so far. What I'm interested in is this idea of, you've got this content that is, there's sexual violence, there's suicidal ideation, there's systemic racism, there's transphobia. So, all of this difficult content, and the idea of protecting your students as they engage with it. And so you've already listed a number of ways in which you do that, whether it's, checking back in with your body and being grounded in your body, or sharing the role of fresh across multiple people. Um, are there other things that have come up as you've thought about, how do we encourage students to engage with this on a level that's going to, um, you know, give them the aesthetic and artistic experience and create a product, but also being conscious of the process and how that's impacting them, and also you as instructors, how do you protect yourselves as you're doing it?
Well, just like to say that in the process, we were constantly, or let me say what we did a lot was what else is going on in this scene that we can explore, because the language is very strong. So we don't have to lean into that, but can we lean into the love? And I think that that was the first thing that came up when we did the first read through. We started on a staggered schedule, so the UC Davis students started earlier, and just their exploration was more text driven, for lack of a better word. That was the thing that came off the page in the reading as an ensemble reading that didn't come across to me reading it by myself. Roger?
Yeah, I mean, you need all those different voices. And I would agree that reading through it, it felt like very overwhelming to hear my own internal voice say these words in order. And it was hard for me to get a sense of what the play was. But I actually used a text to speech program and I listened to it. And there's something about the fact that it's a voice that's supposed to be human, that's like sampling from a library of sounds, but so there's not a continuity in it, and it made more sense to me having it read to me than it did reading it myself. It could just be the way that I process things. I'm forgetting the original question.
I'm just interested in, I mean, it's clear the way that you speak that you're both
Hmm,
really committed to an ethical practice where you're not, this doesn't become a situation where the students are put in danger.
Right.
So I'm interested if there's other ways that that's come up besides the ways you've already mentioned, and then also how you protect yourselves as instructors
yeah.
engaging in the process.
Well, I mean, for me, I think about the fact that the students are in danger. They are in danger in many ways
Already.
already. And
Mhm.
so you have to create a space that assumes that everyone is already in danger, and has boundaries, protocols, structures in place. Um, I'm really big on structuring rehearsal and like telling people what we're going to do next and how things are going to go. We have the same arrival practice, the same departure practice every single time, so the experience is bookended. The way that we've built our team, we've had our intimacy coordinator come in every week pretty much through the process at least once. Um, in
And
terms of,
I just wanted to share one of the things that we brought to that was Audie also has expertise in the area of mental health. And I am a big proponent of what I call an ombudsperson for rehearsal process. So if an actor was having a problem, sometimes they don't want to talk to, although our cast, I must say, they were very vocal in speaking with us, but to have somebody who's outside of the process that's available to talk to, so that sometimes, particularly with student actors, they're sometimes feeling like, well, if I make a complaint or if I say something's wrong, then next time I won't get cast in the show. I don't want to be a troublemaker. So how can you make space for a conversation that doesn't allow them to feel like they are troublemakers? Kind of just like,
mhm.
and being really clear with that. I also wanted to say, with the most charged scenes, I let the actors know, because they were the ones who were like really working with the text, that we were not going to rehearse those scenes, and you would only do it once. And And it was perfectly fine for them to just say the words. If that's what you, because they're so strong, I would say, please don't waste your time with acting. Just say the words, because I am going to rely on the power of the text that's been offered. And you don't have to do any kind of labor.
I think also having conversations on a regular basis about the subject matter and developing language and ways of breaking the silence, I think is, and when I mentioned earlier, like the students are in danger, like this is an issue that like every single college campus faces. And so having conversations about it, I think, is a preventative measure that can help people be more well informed, but also to release the stigma around victimization and really getting people to think in depth about this play and where culpability lies and where responsibility lies and what it is to grow from trauma, what it is to experience trauma. All of those things are really vital for students to have a working language and conversation around.
And just also thinking, again, this play is about so much. It's also about the artistic process. It's about the nature of art and what it has to offer. So, a lot of times we spend a long time rehearsing, watching Hamlet beat up Ophelia, but we don't spend any time finding out about what Ophelia does alone. What does she do in her own private moments? So with this process, occasionally we would allow the actors to explore a private moment that's not texted, that's one of the characters. And how does that feed into other elements of the performance?
I think there's also an element too of this particular rehearsal and filmmaking format that actually lends greater autonomy and control over to the actor because we're doing these physical practices, we're giving them tools, we're giving them devising prompts. They're going away on their own in their own space where they feel safe, where they feel comfortable. They are setting up their lighting according to the way that we've had a lighting consultant come in and train them, and we talk with them about lighting. They're setting up the camera themselves, so there is no like director is the voyeur or the single vantage point. The actors are starting the camera themselves and stopping the camera themselves. And the intimacy work we do talks about how everything that's in the frame is part of the film. So it's your responsibility to check the gate. Everything that you want to be in there is in there. And so that was really helpful for me as a director and also in the editing process because I'm like, they uploaded this video of their own accord. They didn't have to. And like there's some things that people didn't turn in, and that's fine. We just worked with whatever was in the archive. So I find that I think if I wasn't an actor in this process, but I think I might find that very freeing. And like yeah, have a say in how I'm representing myself. I said to Margaret earlier that it's kind of like self-portraiture in a way, what we're doing, but through the lens of character.
Yeah, and I really, particularly as an actor of color, I can't tell you, how many times people would say something like, "Can you say it like a sister?" And I'm like, that's the face I make. And how, when you've been brought up in that process, when a director says, "Oh no, just do it the way you feel like it. It's okay." How it takes a while for actors to kind of realize that you're serious. Oh, I can actually do whatever I want. And then, you as you watch the videos, you watch the guard of doing it the way I want fall and fall and fall. So in those final weeks, those videos are so layered. They are so rich. They are so, the actor saying, "This is how I tell this story." And it's some of the most beautiful work you will ever see. I do wonder. It's made me question the entire process for rehearsal and creating.
I mean, I'm getting emotional thinking about the generosity of the actors in this process. They've been so generous and wonderful, and the work that they've done, it's really extraordinary. And it's exciting what you can do when you give people agency, or actually you allow people to realize they have agency, and then maybe question, why haven't I had more as an artist?
You always said that in our opening practice, one of the things that we recognize is that this is our body. It's not just a body, that, you know, just with it what you will, and that we have autonomy over this body and how it's used in this process. And I think the actors finally believe us.
It's also wonderful how this weaves into the content of the play, which begins with this epigraph from a Mary Oliver poem, where the speaker has clearly been through a traumatic experience, but chooses, instead of telling you about that traumatic experience in the poem, they primarily end up telling the story of a dogfish, which is a kind of shark, and these three little fish that the shark ends up going towards and almost eating, and this need to live in the present moment, and the speaker yells to the little fish like, look, 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 into the audience, so that they might for a second be in the present moment. And so they tell not the story of their trauma, but the sort of mediated story that still reminds them to kind of live in the present and think about where they're at and what they're experiencing. And so I just was hoping you could speak a little bit more to the story mediation process, which you already did, in the ways that people were making their own space and creating their room, and just how that weaves into the sort of text itself, and how that kind of telling of their own stories, or mediating how they are telling this story interacted with the text of the play.
My neighbors are playing loud music. I'm going to let Roger go first, and maybe they'll stop. Boom, everybody.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's we get to experience each other's soundscapes in a really beautiful way. I'm so sorry. I'm kind of spacing on the question. I mean, this notion of like mediating a traumatic experience through another lens, or kind of getting at something through abstract poetic means that's much more difficult to say in a linear manner. I mean, that's how I work always, it's always through physical metaphor in the body, and it's what you get from it, so the audience is, it's really an inkblot test in a way, what you receive from it. There are certain things that are definitely true given circumstances in the text, but I think that this isn't necessarily a Rashomon where there's different versions of the story from fixed viewpoints, but actually you see the different viewpoints weaving together in the same moment. So even as I'm editing it and watching, I don't always know which character I'm seeing. Now, there are times when I go, oh, this is definitely Fresh, or this is definitely Chaz. But because everyone plays Fresh, it could really be a moment in either of those characters' lives. And so I think what the hope is that the film will do is kind of mediate the audience's experience of their own truth, in a way that's really intimate and personal. And I imagine that many audience members will experience this on their mobile devices, and so that with headphones on, which will heighten that experience. But we've tried to make it. There's a line in the play, like what's the line between fetishizing the violence and exposing it, right? And we're always negotiating that distinction. And that's something that I really ran up against in the editing process, and I hope that has been addressed in a positive way. But obviously the audience will see.
The things that I really came forward to me is that the text is the main or I'm not going to say the main, but is a protagonist, excuse me, an antagonist in this work. Like text has this disembodied texting that we do. It has as much strength as Mike Tyson. But we don't.
Yeah. Yes, there are words that just kind of like hit you. And as
I mean, it's
just
literally why I didn't, I mean, not wanting to rehearse them because I didn't want to hear those words. I could not bear, my physical body could not take hearing that language again. Just the one time. That's all I got. That's all I can offer you. All right. But Roger, you go ahead.
well, I think what's really wonderful about working in this particular medium is that we get to explore a really heightened vocabulary without having to build a huge set and wait months to move into the space. Because largely we're using found spaces that the actors had access to. And by the nature of like this sprawling campus we now all live on, right, where you have people across multiple different time zones and countries, uh, there's all these different places. So I can hear Bangalore while I'm seeing Colorado and hearing Los Angeles. So I'm having to arc all of that together, and really it's an exercise in perception. And like this is where the Mary Overly work really comes in, where we're thinking about working on the horizontal, non-hierarchy, that the dialogue is not necessarily always the thing telling the story, uh, primarily. It's there, but it's another element and ingredient in the pot. And as someone who's Black, I know that, you know, every single event it has sound and music and movement attached to it. But I studied musical theater as a younger person, and you know, I thought, oh, this is an American invention, where you know when speaking isn't enough, you sing, and when singing isn't enough, then you dance, and it's a hierarchy. But actually, I just sing when I'm making dinner, or while I'm setting this thing down, or in the middle of a sentence, and that is a that is part of how we communicate. And so. Um, I like to think of this process as like a potluck. We are just everyone brings what they have, and we all everyone sits at the same table wherever you sit down, and you can get up and move somewhere else at any time. Um, and there's that agency, but then also there's the multiple different layers and flavors and inputs always.
And also speaking to that, I think, you know, going back to the question of pedagogy, I think that a lot of the way that we teach and enforce these silos for instruction rob the students of their potential. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've said, given somebody, oh, just sing that. I don't know how to sing. I'm like, oh, sure you do. Just go ahead and sing. Just, whatever you do is fine. Just sing it. You know, and there was a point where I said, you're going to make a mural. And the actor's like, oh, I don't know. You're making a mural. We're sending you the paper. Good luck with that, right? And it wasn't suddenly the person that part of the person's creativity, it says, okay, yes, I can do this. Let's find out how it works. Also, I think that answers part of your question, Jessica.
I got many answers to my question, and weaving back and forth from like the sort of role of the text as antagonist to the ways in which there were so many other things speaking than just the text itself, to the sort of spaces that you were able to open up for students, Margaret. So thank you for those answers from me, both Roger and Margaret.
I was already excited to see this. And now just having this conversation, I cannot wait because I'm so curious, and I'm really excited for the detail-oriented folks who are watching the talk forward. What will they encounter when they come to the website? Without any spoilers, is it going to be just like a bunch of things to click on? Will it just be start and be carried through?
I think Margaret's like eyebrows are telling us that it's going to be a surprise. But what I can say is that our web development team and our web design team and Brandon, our producer, is our co-producer, has been so wonderful, have all been so wonderful about this process of building this site. And
And
we've
the,
always thought about building thinking about this as like a physical location,
right.
thinking about the haptic potential of the internet as a place, and what is not possible in a traditional theatrical space.
Right.
Let's lean into those things rather than trying to squeeze theater into the internet.
And it's funny, I'm going to tell you. So, any of you who ever want to work with Roger, this is one thing you have to know. If you have an idea that you think is completely undoable and that no one in the world would be interested in it, don't tell it to Roger, because it will be manifest in reality. Because when I brought up the website, it was just an idea. I didn't think it could be done. And quite honestly, it was before Northwestern became our co-producer. And I just like, it'd be great, but it's never going to happen. But it's just sheerly because Roger, it's like, no, that's a great idea. We can do it. No, we're going to do it. No, we're going to do it. Okay. And we're going to do it even better than you ever imagined, right? Because Roger really leans in with an imagination that really is exciting and daunting. But they'll get to the website. They will have choices, because you are watching. It is theater in the internet, just like everything else in the internet. You have a choice. Do whatever you want. You might regret it, but do what you want. And I think that is a big part of the world of Click as a written document, and to see that, how do you make that theatrical, is in our way. Roger talked about this haptic idea. The audience actually has to do it. You can sit there and just not do it. It's not going to work unless you take part in it and become a co-conspirator in this making.
It reminds me of this wonderful Octavia Butler quote that I might be slightly not saying correctly. So I am a very detail-oriented person. If I was watching this, I would ding myself for points if I got this wrong. But my understanding of it is all that we touch, we change. And all that we change touches us. So there's this, and we've had these wonderful speakers come in, like Anuj Vaidya, who's a wonderful artist and media literacy scholar, and he was just talking about how when you click to search something, that requires an output of power. Like that isn't just like people think like, oh, I'm gonna get a tablet to be more green, and all my notes will just be in the cloud and it'll be fine. But every time you do a query for that file, it's sucking energy from somewhere, right? We've had the hottest decade on record in world history, in recorded world history, this decade and the previous decade, and things are not good. So I think what I think this is a call to action, a call to intervention, and really thinking about the choices that you make, what you touch, what you choose to look at, what you choose to see, what you choose to give energy to, what you choose to like. It's not just like, oh, magic. It's just not just doesn't just evaporate. It has real world consequences. Every single click has real world consequences.
Every little emoji, every little hashtag, these gestures are not little. And they impact worlds and individuals. I'm sorry, Jess.
No. And the way that the play itself talks to the sonic nature of this clicking that we can hear now. If I do it on my Mac, it's quite loud. People kind of make fun of the sound of the keyboard on this, whereas on the phone, we don't hear that sound anymore, but it's still a choice that we're making in that silence as we click or press on each thing, even if we don't have that kind of moment of feedback, our role in those spaces and in shaping them. And I love, Roger, that you pull in this Butler quote, since Butler's work is on speculative fiction, and her work Parable of the Sower is so popular right now because of its relevance to our very, very present moment. And so I just wonder if you talk just a teeny bit to this notion of the speculative, which also comes up in this piece. Technology perhaps is more complex than the technology we have right now, but not that much more. It's pretty close to our present moment. And so I wonder if you'd speak just a little bit to this notion of the speculative and what it can tell us about the present.
I would love to. So I'll try and keep this brief. Okay, but like we're living in that futurity that Butler was writing about and that Prince was writing songs about. 1999. There's a great article in the New York Times today. I suggest you all look at it. It's really good, and it's actually a visual article. Really extraordinary. The changes in journalism have been really interesting to watch in this digital landscape, when the changes that journalists have had to make. But I'm taking a side tangent, as I am known to do. But what I love about speculative fiction is that it's the future as it would be if we continued going on without making any changes, as I understand it. So it's not what could happen, it's what will happen if we don't intervene. And that's really chilling. So I think of this genre, speculative fiction is very important because it allows people who are forward thinking to see the consequences that we don't in the current moment understand.
One of the ways we thought about exploring this element, interestingly, I think, is through one of the live performances that are available as part of the experience of engaging with re-click. And within the framework of performance, where you are projecting a future and projecting a past as one of the ways of exploring the themes of the work, is I find it very emotionally engaging in ways that pure text or lots of different actors, and lots of different lights sort of astonishing us with their abilities on stage. This is a way of kind of like holding our focus on this idea of this speculative, just like holding the focus there in a way that allows us to contemplate, be contemplative around it.
Yeah, and I mean, one of our intentions behind this work is to create a space for contemplation on the internet. And that's guided a lot of our directorial decisions.
One of the things that we said was that what are the questions that we should have asked before we turned on the internet, that we never asked, but now we're in it. So, but we can still ask those questions and hopefully make some changes. That's what one of the reasons why we had Anuj coming in and speaking with the acting ensemble, and then a talk at large, another talk forward, where we were able to look at what we're doing in a different way.
I'm so excited to interact with the play and have that sort of experience, and to click through and to see this work. And I just thank you so much for all that y'all have shared about this work, what you've created, and the space that you've made for us to interact in and wonder what we've done and try to reimagine our futures in. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It's wonderful. It's this is a space of contemplation on the internet right now. So thank you for the gift of sharing your ideas and your process and your artistry.
Thank you, Oona.
Thank you so much.
And Jessica Stokes Really appreciate that.
Thank you
Yes.
so much, Oona. Thank you so much, Jessica. What a delight to
Yay.
talk with you. And just thank you so much. And
You've
thank
made
you, Brandon, in the control room.
Yes, thank you all so much. This has just reinvigorated my own passion for working on this piece, and what a blessing it was to bring Roger and Margaret into my life. And this piece and the work they've done with the students is truly remarkable. So just once again, urge you all who are watching to please join us for our performances of Re-click, which will be December 9th, 10th, and 12th at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you go to our website, which you can get to by two of ways, you can type in re-click.ucdavis.edu or northwestern.edu/re-click. Both of those will be in the description, but you can go there to access the website now, RSVP, so you get all the updates and information about the show, including these wonderful talk forwards. As Roger and Margaret mentioned, we have another one that's posted on our YouTube page with a news video, so I highly encourage you to check that one out. And we'll have some more going on as well. But really hope you will join us next week on the 9th, 10th, and 12th for our wonderful performances of Re-click. So thank you all for being here. Roger, Margaret, any parting words?
No, thank you all for really diving in and discussing the substance of the work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.